Okay, guys.
Yeah.
I'm going to start. Welcome to International Culinary Hour. Now we're in March, so I figured Ireland would be the best place to go this month. But looks at your handouts. I ran out, but she's making more copies for those of you who don't have a handout. So I'll start from the beginning. Ireland is an island nation in the North Atlantic. Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom, Great Britain. About 20% of the land mass is devoted to farming, but less than 10% of that is used to grow crops, the majority being utilized as grazing land for livestock. The arrival of the Anglo-Normans in 1169 AD, those are the Normans who remained in England after William the Conqueror came there in 1066, affected both farming and diet. Wheat, peas, and beans became staple foods. Food customs changed as French and Italian dishes and customs influenced the upper class cuisine. The potato arrived by the late 1500s from the Americas. Within 200 years, it replaced the older staples of oats and dairy products and became the mainstay of the Irish diet. In the 1840s, the country's heavy reliance on the potato led to the Irish potato famine. Most farmers were growing one particular potato variety that was highly sensitive to disease, and the potato blight that started in Belgium swept through the country. It destroyed 1/3 of Ireland's potato crop. By 1845, within the next 2 years, 2/3 was destroyed. More than 1 million people had perished as a result of the blight, and 2 million emigrated to other countries. As soon as the threat of the blight had dissipated, the potato returned as a staple of the Irish diet. Present-day chemicals are being used to protect the crops from disease, and they also have much more varieties than that one variety that was affected by the blight. So there's a lot of crosses of different breeds. The Irish were consuming more potatoes than most countries of the world. Foods in Ireland are usually served without sauces, with the exception of what we're going to do today. Obviously a stew, because you need a liquid medium to cook the meat. And gravies, not cooking, is done without many herbs or spices. Staples of Ireland include potatoes, grains, especially oats, and dairy products. The Irish have also been accomplished cheesemakers for centuries, and about 50 homemade cheeses are considered delicacies. Soups, seafood, and meats all play a major role in the Irish diet. Soups are usually thick and hearty, with various meats and fresh vegetables being common ingredients. Since Ireland is mostly surrounded by water, the Irish enjoy salmon, scallops, lobster, mussels, and oysters, but meat is eaten more frequently. The most common meats are beef, lamb, and pork. Irish stew, which is what we'll be making today, has been recognized as a national dish for centuries. Soda bread. Mrs. Skinny makes a nice soda bread every year. I know you do that, right? For our ridge. Yeah. Soda bread and teas are mainstays, as well as whiskey and beer. Generous portions of food are common at home and in restaurants. A large breakfast was traditionally eaten in rural Ireland, including porridge, soda bread, pancakes, eggs, and various meats. Dinner, the main meal of the day, used to be eaten at lunchtime. In present day, though, however, many Irish people eat lighter at morning and at midday, having the main meal later in the day when they come home from work or school. Lunch is often a bowl of hot soup, served with soda bread, and many pubs still serve a traditional large midday dinner. Supper, the term supper, in Ireland means a late night snack, which is typically a slice of bread with butter and a glass of milk. All right? The recipe that I'm going to be following today, you see the last 2 pages of your handout, made for 10 servings. First of all, I'm going to talk about braising versus stewing. Today, because it's called Irish lamb stew, the major difference really is this. If I have like a pot roast per se, a large cut of meat, it's only reserved for like muscles that are used a lot. Leg meat, it could be on the cow, it could be on the lamb, any kind of animal. But the meat gets very tough because it's used all the time, a lot of connective tissue. So what happens is you can't really saute like a veal shank and get that nice soft texture of it. You need a liquid medium to break down all the connective tissue because that's a heavy muscle that's been worked a lot. Same is true for here. So braising, use like a big cut of roast. I know Todd covered this in his demo too. A large cut of meat and a pan that just fits it with liquid about 2/3 of the way up, slow cooking it. Now stewing is the same basically as braising, except you have bite-sized pieces. So after you cook this down, you're not gonna have to deal with the whole roast to slice. In a way it's better too because when you cook it, more surface area is exposed. If I left this whole lamb leg intact, it might take a little longer to cook it. I have to rotate it progressively in the cooking method. But when you stew meat, all that surface area is exposed to seasoning, to the liquid medium, so now it breaks down much easier. Okay, so that's basically the difference between a stew and a braise. This particular dish right here Ooh. This is a leg. Now, the reason why I have on this gray here, I like to kind of keep the meat, if there's any residual blood or juices coming down, I'll keep it as dry as I can. I'm going to season it as I go, salt and pepper. And also the grate will serve another purpose too, I'm going to show you in a second. Because we're using a beef stock, it's going to be very liquidy. At the end you want to have a texture that's a thick stew. You don't want to have like a brothy kind of stew, everything falls off the meat and the vegetables. You want to thicken it up a little bit. So what you do is dust it with a little flour just to coat. And all the residual flour that's not going to be on the meat will drip down between the screen and the pan, so I don't have to worry about like large clumps of flour on the meat. Now in the pan, what you're going to use is the rendered pork. Is very big in Ireland, obviously, so is curing meats. So bacon is going to be the fat medium of this dish. So I got the pan nice and hot. What you're really looking for is just to render the bacon until it's crispy enough. Go a little bit. Let go a little bit. Okay, over here. I never really talked about this much in other demos. Knives. Basically, to have like a great knife set, you really only need 3 for cooking. This right here is a paring knife. See the small one for fine work? You'll see me use this. This is a boning knife. This is what I used to take the meat off the lamb, because you can see this blade flexes. So as you're going around the curvature of the bone, you can actually maneuver it much more than this, which is a much more stiffer blade. So if you have like a paring knife, a boning knife for cooking purposes, this right here is like the chef's hand right here. It's an extension of the chef. Most of your work is done with this. Now these two are really for finishing. A slicing knife will be used for like a cooked meat for serving, serrated for like breads, things like that. So as far as actually cooking goes, as long as you have these 3 to manipulate whatever product you have, you're good. Good paring knife, good boning knife, good chef's knife. That's all you really need. Okay, what I'm looking for is like a rendered bacon fat. I'm going to save this bacon too on the side. Now I'm ready for the meat. Okay, what I made for you guys today, it's a large portion. Typically, this is what they call a brazier or rondeau. So the pan that I made it today, but it's warming up in the oven down here. So this is kind of what you use. You're looking for like a flat-sided pan with a lid. I'll go over it later, because most of the sauteing is done in here in the beginning. You want to retain moisture. Here I don't mind using a saute pan. I'm actually putting what I'm cooking in the straight-sided pan. I'll show you later. I cover this a little bit here. I want the curved sides, because in the beginning, I want the moisture to be removed from the dish. I'm looking for browning in my meat, and any extra like water or juices to be gone from the dish. I'm kind of concentrating the meat to brown the outside. First knife you use is this right here, the paring knife. As I said before, you're looking for just for finishing work. And this dish, I'm looking for a diced onion. I'll show you. if I was wanted to slice it, I think I covered this once too before. Once you remove the outside skin, you'll see the core, okay, where the onion was intact here. When you dice, you always want to leave that intact. If I was going to slice it, I remove that so they all separate very easily. And because I'm doing a dice, I progressively go down the onion like this, and the core is keeping all those slices intact. So now all I got to do is go down like that, all not the dices. But the onion is very nice because it comes in layers. Sometimes you see the chefs go like this and like whatever. You really don't have to do that because the onion already comes in layers. It's going to separate anyway when it hits the heat. That's kind of what you're looking for, that nice browning on the side of the meat. Minus one. You know, this right here is what they call the fond, the bottom of the pan. You don't want to get rid of that. Okay, that's going to add a lot of flavor. All the caramelized proteins from your meat are in there. So if I just take this pan and throw it in the sink, I lost a good portion of flavor. What this is going to do is, it's sticking to the pan. So what you want to do is called deglazing it. I still have a couple more vegetables, the onions are put in first. The remaining fat. And then for this dish, I also have carrots. Now these two onions and carrots have a good concentration of sugar. So as I'm cooking these down, besides getting rid of that raw taste and removing the moisture, I'm actually concentrating the sugar so you taste onion and carrot. It's much more pronounced by doing this on intense heat. Now this. Okay, any good Irishman really doesn't usually put this in the food because it evaporates the alcohol, so you pretty much drink this straight. But to add a good flavor to this stew, I'm going to flambe. So one thing you got to remember with flambeing, I've seen it happen before. If this was an open flame, as soon as the alcohol hits this, the vapors will go over that side of the pan. So I've seen people when they pour it, it'll lick back and it goes in the bottom, blows the bottom out, so you have glass. So always want to get the one side of the pan very hot. Remove it from the heat and then ignite it. If this was a gas stove, I could just tilt the pan, but because it's not, I'll ignite it with this. So what's left is like that earthiness of the bourbon, the alcohol's gone now. White wine. And this will be the beef stock. You can see at this point in time it's very brothy, but I'm not going to worry. Any of the residual flour that's stuck to the pan is now released. The pan is like very smooth and clear now because I deglazed with the alcohol, the wine, the broth. So that's all part of my sauce now. And all the flour is still in that meat. So as it cooks and braises, it's going to thicken as it goes. This particularly add thyme and bay leaf as well. Once it comes back up to a simmer, you could reintroduce the meat and the bacon. And what you're looking for now is kind of like, in a braise I can have like a big piece of meat sticking out, I have to rotate. Now as a stew, as long as I have enough meat just to cover, maybe just to below that surface of the meat, you're fine. You want to have like, at least, when you're serving, at least 2 to 3 portions of a stew of the sauce per person. 2 ounces, I'm sorry. And typically, because it's a tough meat, I would cover this. Low oven, 325. A lot of recipes are going to say you can stew or braise on top of the oven. I'm not really a big fan of that, and I'll tell you why. If I just leave this here right now, covered, it's fine. But my heat source is only from the bottom of the pan, okay? So I run the risk of burning. So you go really low, whatever. I like to, once it comes to a simmer, I cover it and put it in like a low and 325, because what happens at that point, the pan is getting bombarded from all sides from dry heat, not just one heat source. So you don't have to like constantly worry about the bottom of the pan. So anytime like you're making a stew or braise, think about just turning your oven on low and putting the pan in the oven instead of completely cooking on the top of the oven. Also too, because of that heat source, the meat that's, if you have like a big pile of the meat, the bottom one might be cooking a little faster than the other ones. Whereas if you do like the inside the oven, the heat is constant from all sides of the pan. And then what you typically do is cover this. You put it in the oven for about an hour and a half. Okay? Now, finished ingredients would be potatoes. If you go to the market, you'll see a couple. These are waxy potatoes. You can see the smooth skin, very shiny. There's another one called russet potatoes. Those are the big brown ones used for baking potatoes. Now, for items such as this, because it's a liquid medium, I always tend towards these, because these potatoes versus the baking potato, big difference. These are a high moisture, low starch potato, meaning this will hold its shape in that soup or whatever. If I had the baking potato, it would break down, you'd lose it. You end up thickening the soup, you never see the potato in it. So what happens, put this around just for safety purposes, always get a flat side. You can see like all the moisture inside this potato alone, with the reflection of the light. Now you're not going to normally get that with the rust, it's very dry. This will suck up, the starch that's in there will suck up some of the moisture, but like if I use a baking potato, it would just totally break down and make the sauce very mealy, and you'd lose the potato totally. So you always want to use something like this. This is called a waxy potato. They come in different, like Yukon Gold's another version of it. Russet is the baking one. You kind of save that for like mashed potatoes, French fries, baking potatoes, something that's like a high starch and fluffy. This, if you don't want more meat, to stand up in liquid medium, you have to use one of these. Much better. You can see it. It's gradually starting to thicken up now as it's reducing. Now, if this was cooked for about an hour, hour and a half, the last stage of the game would be just to put the potatoes in, put it back in the oven for like another 20 minutes until the potatoes are done and you're ready to go. It's finished. Any questions?
Eric, I've been cooking my Irish stew in a Dutch oven on top of the stove.
That's fine. The Dutch oven is fine too, because it's kind of like a crock pot. It's very low heat anyway. You could do that too. Dutch ovens work very well because you're covering it, you're trapping all the steam and the moisture. It's the same kind of purpose. I just like, if you don't have the option of a Dutch oven or something like that, the oven is always the best case scenario. I do that. I'm sure it comes out fine.
I'm glad all these years I haven't been doing it.
No, not at all. Not at all.
As long as it turns out right.
Yep.
What about, oh, I missed the beginning. What kind of lamb was that? When you go to the store,
That was leg.
like lamb stew that you could find?
It was lamb leg on the bone. I just took the bone out and cut it. You're dealing with kind of like here, like the tibia and the fibula on your leg. It goes down like the shank area, so you just remove that bone, and then like, or you can also get lamb leg from up here where your femur is. But it's kind of that whole area. Just remove that bone and dice up the meat. Remove the silver skin. There's a lot of connective tissue. And because the leg is used a lot, braising is usually the best. You know, something like that. Yeah. It's getting there. Man, easy crowd. Yes.
What about more vegetables?
You can add more vegetables too.
The potatoes.
Carrots.
What kind?
Carrots. Carrots would be usually in Irish lamb stew. You can put carrots. I dice mine really small to break them down fast for sweetness. But usually carrots and onions would be staples in the Irish lamb stew.
Celery maybe.
You could. You could. No. No. Celery's got like a very pronounced flavor too. Even though it's like 90% water, you still know you have celery in there. It's got a good flavor. You can add a little bit too. That's part. No. Yeah.
What kind of green vegetable would you recommend serving with this?
Oh, green veg? It could run the gamut. You could like braise like a kale, a braised dish with nice on top of that. So I'm going to serve this particularly with like barley peel off. So if you have like a field green, a mustard green that has some kind of, can stand up like a, not even a baby spinach, you need something like a little tougher like a kale or something like that, or mustard green would be nice. Or beet greens, things like that would be nice. Some kind of braised item.
Did you use whole bay leaves, Aaron?
I did. Yeah, so like when I'll serve you now, I'll be looking for 6 bay leaves in that big pot, so I left it in there. But yeah, you don't want to, unless you have a spice grinder, you can actually grind them to a powder, you won't have to worry about it, but because they leave them whole, I have to fish them out because they're not digestible if you don't break them down in the grinder. But yeah, and dry thyme I used. And that's another thing too, if you're going to make a stew like this, always add, if you have fresh herbs versus dry herbs, you're always going to add like, almost like 2.5 times fresh herbs versus dry, because when they're dried, obviously the moisture is out of that. It's a concentrated flavor. And also, if you had fresh herbs at the beginning of this stew, you totally lose the flavor. You only want them as a finishing ingredient. That's why dry herbs are always added in the beginning of the cooking process versus fresh herbs as a finishing, because you'll definitely lose the flavor. That will totally break down. Yes?
When in Ireland they serve cabbage, what dishes do they serve cabbage with?
Cabbage by itself usually. There's what's another one called colcannon. There's one. They usually saute that with some potatoes and ham. There's a lot of them actually. They can make like a potato pancake, and I think they shred cabbage in that as well. So that's like a staple as much as the potato is. It's a side dish. Vegetable. So usually they just braise it, and they can serve it like butter, some kind of smoked meat. Vegetable addition. Onion, yeah.
You could do it in the pressure cooker too.
Sure, we can take less time. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that would take a lot less time.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Rosemary, you know.
Sure.
something.
Rosemary and lamb is very good. Yeah. Yeah. That's more like the Mediterranean style too. Yeah.
If you were to add mushrooms with this.
You can.
That's like a really earthy taste.
Yes.
How much would it, I mean, affect the whole taste of the stew, and how much, and when would you add them? Because I know they cook up quickly too.
Yeah, what happens is mushrooms, as well as you know, when you saute them, you also got to worry about another thing too, the moisture content. So when you saute mushrooms, if I put the mushrooms in there, I'd have to thicken up that sauce with something else, because once they cook, it's going to render a lot of juice. So it's going to be very loose. So what I particularly do is, like, I don't like mushrooms to taste slimy. I don't like that texture myself. So I'd like oil them, salt and pepper, roast them in an oven. And I'd throw them at the end of the process, because you wouldn't lose the flavor of the mushroom in the sauce, and you wouldn't thin it out either by losing much. So I cook them kind of separately and use it as a finishing ingredient. But you can do it in the beginning.
Okay, if you overcook them, don't they add a bitter taste?
They can,
Yeah.
depending on the variety. That comes from the gills underneath.
Okay.
Like the portobellos, sometimes they scrape out those black gills and things like that.
Yeah.
It colors your sauce black too, sometimes it depends on the mushroom. But like regular cultivated white ones, or baby portobello ones aren't that stringent, but as they graduate and get bigger, then they have that characteristic bitterness in the gills underneath, so depends on how you. Everybody ready to taste? Yeah. All right. We were talking about next month too. I think we can go to Northern Europe, like Nordic countries, like Scandinavia, thinking. That was mentioned last time too, so I think like do a salmon dish or something like that. A little horseradish or kind of springy flavors. Because you got asparagus coming around the corners, like peas, so I can like this nice vegetable on the side too as well. Yeah, Charles.
Eric, how much would this cost to make? All the rest of it.
Let me see. Depends on your purveyor where you get your meat from too. Like here I got lucky because I have like food contract, but it depends. What do you think? Price per pound of lamb?
Sorry.
So that's all right. Let me think about this. The whole dish, you mean? I don't know. 20? I I mean, salt, pepper is negligible, flour, garlic, onions. I'd say, shoot, like 20, upwards of higher 20s, 30 bucks, yeah, something like that. So the food, yeah, yeah.
And you could use beef instead of lamb.
You sure can.
That would be cheaper.
You sure can, yeah. Yeah. Red wine goes good with beef too. Well, it depends on your flavor profile, but basically the stewing process is the same. What you're always going to do is you're going to saute your meat first, remove that from the pan. So whatever's stuck, you always remove the meat first, then add your vegetables, your garnish ingredients. And once they're sauteed, you deglaze the pan, add your sauce, reintroduce the meat, cover it and cook. So that process is always the same. So no matter what ingredients you add to this, you can change any of those ingredients. If you read the directions, the process is basically the same. And if you don't want to use bacon fat, then you can start with olive oil. Now what I did for a side dish, kind of ties into what I did last week with the paella. I covered cooking the rice. We did paella rice last time. That was like a pilaf style. So basically what I did, I took some barley, regular barley, cooked in beef stock after I sauteed in a little olive oil. Now the differences between barley and rice is rice, you're gonna have like a long grain rice. You need about 2 parts liquid to 1 part rice. This is a little bigger, has like a bigger seed coat on it, so you need about 2.5 parts liquid to 1 part rice. So for every 1 cup of barley, 2.5 cups of beef stock. And I just sauteed some onion and bacon in there and finished it off in the oven, same way. So basically for this one I did the equivalent of 3 times, that's about 18 pounds of meat in there, of lamb I did for this one. So, in this big pot. I'm gonna finish this with a little freshness because sometimes you have like the stew meat is a little soft and so is the barley. So it's like a fresh finish. I'm gonna like put some scallions on top, fresh cream scallions. But